In terms of policy, right? You're also part of EPG, Economic Policy Group. Let's talk about EPG now. So you, Bridge India and EPG together runs this India Week, and I was there and I've seen, witnessed how powerful it is. So my takeaway from that India Week last year was like so much learning. As I said, like what's going to happen next was a question. So for me, when I sat in those like conference rooms for 2 days, the one thing I was looking at is like, will it be a mini, World Economic Forum
Mm,
in some
mm,
time?
mm,
Probably for India and UK alone, instead of like having everyone.
mm.
I mean, is it too much to ask for? I mean, is it a good wish?
Well, that I'll leave to the powers that be to see if they if we get some luck to make it into that kind of big forum. But I think certainly there's growth year on year. So this year we'll have very significant growth compared to what we had last year because we've had more time to plan. Um, and there's some collateral we can use from last year to say that we delivered these things. Um, and I was one of the best moments from me from last time was a principal secretary of one of the ministers that came subsequently. So the event was on a Thursday and a Friday, and then I think on the Monday, maybe on the Sunday, he tweeted out something along the lines of, "I've been on lots of foreign trips. This was the most productive one for me."
Brilliant.
Usually, when somebody tweets that, it's a communications person who's written the tweet and is forcing that person to share it. This time, we had no idea that went out, so it was a completely genuine thing.
Surprise. Good surprise to you.
It was a very good surprise, and so I think things like that are what we aim for, and I think as long as we do, instead of that happening once, if we do that 10, 15 times every year, then automatically we'll grow and attract um, the right kind of crowd, not just from India but from outside. I mean, last year Ragurajan came from Chicago to come to this, and we had two or three people that came from UAE, a couple that came from Germany. Um, so I think slow and steady, I think we'll get there. So I think the UK needs to be a lot smarter about how it works with India. Migration is a case in point where when Theresa May was Home Secretary, lots of colleges across the UK were shut down because there were uh, too many illegals coming and staying, not just from India, but from Pakistan, Nigeria. These were the three big countries. Um, Post COVID, Britain opened its doors completely
So
to student migration as well as health and social care visas. Um, and now suddenly Britain is saying actually that was an overreach and let's scale it down again. So this fairly random change in policy, uh, it happens in different countries as ministers change and priorities change. But for a country that's an old power like Britain, for it to happen not just in one area, but in many areas, it looks like Britain doesn't know what it's doing. Um, and so Britain, I think, can achieve a lot more from the relationship with India rather than just having open doors and welcoming
true.
more
So
Indian
true.
immigrants. But I think Britain needs to first decide what it wants, and part of that, I think, and this has been out of favor as a term for a long time in Britain, is having an industrial strategy. So if you have an industrial strategy and you say, this is how we want to create jobs in the UK, this is the kind of industry you want in the UK, which has been lost before, and you want to bring it back, or at least slow the decline in some industries,
Yeah.
then you can say, well, now this is the education requirement. Now this is the unskilled or skilled labor requirement, and then from that, all your conversations with other countries follow. Right now, it looks like the economy conversation, the migration conversation, the student conversation are being run by different wings of the current government, and they're not cohesive.
So do you think that they're not talking to each other as much they need to?
I'm sure they are. I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. The government is full of very smart people, but I think when you have so much change so often, we've had five prime ministers in
So
the
true.
last 5 or 6 years. Uh, we've had something like 17 housing ministers, 11 education ministers, four or five chancellors just in the last 4 or 5 years. When so much change happens, inevitably there will be a lack of continuity.
This is something never happened in Britain before.
Yeah.
So kind of change. Yeah, I know. I mean, one good outcome for Indians is like having Indian prime minister
Mm.
after all this,
Mm.
which is a good thing. So how do you think the relationships are strengthened? I mean, did that change anything at all in the
Because of
mindset
having
of
an Indian prime
Indian
minister.
prime minister?
I think it's more of a signaling mechanism. I
Okay.
think Rishi Sunak is very much a he's a British prime minister.
Yeah.
He
So
happens to be Indian, but he's prime minister of Britain. There have been some signaling things. So, for example, he's worn a Rakhi,
yeah,
and that's been
he
in
went to the
several
temple
videos.
Akshardham when he was in India.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he went to a katha of a Gujarati priest in Britain with somebody from the House of Lords that took him, and then various other conservative councillors. So that resonated, and I think that was not because of political messaging. I think that was
Mm.
something, even if he wasn't in the limelight as prime minister, he would have done anyway.
True. So true.
So I think it's very important to be true to yourself uh, as somebody in senior leadership position. So I think the fact that he's able to do these things and he's able to articulate what he stands for in that part of his life, I think is really important as a signaling mechanism. Of course, there's other parts of his day job where he has various other pushes and pulls, so he's not able to articulate um, maybe what he would want to articulate had he been dealt different cards.
Yeah. So, but he himself as a finance minister before, like as chancellor, what do you call it as, right? Versus being a prime minister now, his progress back then, like the way he's been applauded for his work, probably not happening. I mean, at least we're not seeing that much at the
Yeah.
moment. Probably, yeah. There's a rough road for him,
Hmm.
but he's doing as much as he can.
The best day in his professional life was when he became prime minister. It's been downhill since then.
You help them in consulting, you help them in the entry barriers,
Correct.
clearing entry barriers and all that stuff. Okay, but how do you do this? Like, would you work with the governments in India, or is it more like just like any other business who would just want to go and talk to their IT or the industry ministry? Is that how it works, or you have a bit more built-in framework as such?
So it's usually larger companies like working to frameworks. So if
Mm.
you hired a big four consulting firm or a McKinsey, there's a particular framework that you fit into. I think our clients are much more they'll be founders or it'll be their own
Okay.
money they put into the
Small
business.
businesses.
So they know small businesses in less than 50 million
Okay.
turnover,
Okay.
but owner managed. So they know what they want to do. So
Okay.
they don't much care about the consulting wrapper. It's
Mm.
much more about I need to achieve this in 12 months because my targets are this. Um, so often there's no government interaction. If
Okay.
it's let's say in the education sector or if it's a particular type of business, it might just be private sector. Um, when there's innovation or when it's a new something new that's coming into the Indian market, or when there's let's say tariffs or customs or land acquisition, things like that involved, then of course you need to interact with the government, and it's
Mm.
about uh, a client comes to a consultant, and we're no different to remove a problem that they have. So they know what the problem is, and they just want you to fix it. So then your job as a consultant is to say, well, this is how we can get from A to B.
Yeah.